My name is Cesar Pereira. I'm the immediate past chair of CIR Brazil branch. And together with my colleague Cristina Mastrobono, our current vice chair, I welcome you to CIR Brazil Moments. We are very happy to have this partnership with Arbitration Channel, which enables us to reach our audience every other Wednesday from Brazil. And today we have here with us two international arbitration and international sales CISG superstars, Ingeborg Schwenzer and Louise Barrington. And the topic of today's episode is to talk about the Vis East Moot competition and what it is about, and how important it can be for Latin American universities. Um, our guests today really do not need any type of introduction to anybody who has anything to do with international arbitration in the CISG. But just briefly, I would like to point out that Ingeborg Schwenzer is Professor Emerita from the University of Basel, and is the editor of the most important commentary on the CISG, and also a co-author of the recently published second edition of Global Sales and Contract Law. And Louise Barrington is a chartered arbitrator, a fellow of CIR, the Vis East director since its inception, and an inspiration to thousands of students all over the world, especially students from jurisdictions with less opportunities to participate in international competitions like this, whom she takes a special effort in helping coming to events such as Vis East. So without taking any more time, I would like to start maybe with Louise. Louise, I met and became friends with both of you, both you and Ingeborg, when I first went to Vis East in Hong Kong many years ago as an arbitrator. And this alone would be a reason to make Vis East very special for me. But there are many other reasons, and I would like you to comment, if possible, what Vis East is all about, and what do you think teams enjoy the most in participating?
Well, thanks, Cesar. The Vis East, like its sister moot, the Vis in Vienna, is an educational experience in the guise of a competition. In other words, the students that come to argue at the Vis East and the Vis are coming to try to win, of course, because the competition makes it fun. But the whole thing was started because some professors wanted to make the world aware of this new, at the time, CISG convention, the CISG convention on the sale of goods. And so they decided to do it in the form of an arbitration because there was no arbitration competition at that point. There was the Jessup moot, which is public law. And so this was a really original idea, but it was there to sell the CISG. And it's now become just as known for its arbitration practices as the CISG. So really, the students are getting fabulous experience. They work really hard, but they get experience in research, in analysis and issue spotting, in drafting, in oral advocacy, and things like practical things like time management and teamwork as well. So they're getting generic skills that will stand them in good stead, whether they go into arbitration or any other branch of law, or in fact, any business at all, because when someone hires them, they hit the ground running and they've got a great reputation. Just as important, though, is the other half, which is the social half of the Vismut, and that is all of the parties and events that go on. And these give the students, many of whom are traveling away from home for the first time, it gives them a real intercultural experience and also the chance to make friends and connections that will last a lifetime. So it's a really holistic approach to education.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. My impression coming to Vis East in Hong Kong was that coming from a country that with European tradition, like based on immigration and all that, the opportunity of going to Asia and to meet whole different type of culture in many universities that may not be part of our everyday connections was especially interesting. And Ingeborg, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I would underscore everything that Louise mentioned. It's an incredible learning experience. It trains the soft skills of the students that are never taught at law schools. And it is in many instances the first step on the ladder of an international professional career in the field. Today, I want to underscore this. The mere participation in the Vismut qualifies students and may act as a door opener to big international law firms.
Yeah, no, that's very true, and we can see that the Vis is a recruitment setting for many law firms, and that's true everywhere, and it's true here in Brazil as well as in Latin America. Christina, would you like to continue, please?
Yes. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure for me to be in the presence of two superstars of the arbitration community. And I already told this to Ingeborg, but you are really role models for all the women that work in the arbitration field, and probably for a lot of students that see in yourself this role model. Well, as I understood, you both are following the Vis East or are in the Vis East since the beginning. And this season, the 2022-2023 season, we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of the competition. So how do you see the growth and the change during this period? Please, Ingeborg, could you start answering that?
Yes, if you look back 20 years, or even with regard to the Vis in Vienna 30 years, you can realize it started off with mostly European and some American teams. There were no teams from Latin America. There were no teams from Asia. It only started with the Vis East that also Asian teams started to participate. And I still remember in Hong Kong when I arbitrated the first Chinese or even Japanese teams, their English was poor. They didn't know how to act. They were inexperienced. They couldn't answer questions. The Indians, for example, they were acting out as if they were in an Indian court, which is very different from what we know from courts in civil law countries. And they were speaking with such a speed that hardly anybody could follow them. So all this has changed. The teams have been acting much more professionally, like practitioners do. Now we have teams from countries where the students are not as privileged as from Western countries, for example. And this is due to the ongoing efforts of my dear friend Louise, who is running capacity building programs in countries such as Vietnam, Cambodia, Myanmar, Nepal. And she brings the teams to Hong Kong, where they also have the possibility to participate in such an international event.
All right. Louise, do you have some comments on that, please?
For Ingeborg. That's my comment. I will now underline what Ingeborg said, because I remember my first experience of the moot, and that was in Vienna. It was in the late 90s. I think it was around the 6th or 7th or 8th. And as a fairly young arbitrator, I was absolutely thrilled to be in the company of the gods of arbitration, the people that wrote the books that I'd studied arbitration, from. But then looking on the other side, watching the students arrive on the first day, nervous, unsure of themselves. Where do I sit? How do I address the arbitrator? Do I have to shake hands with the arbitrators? It was just, they were really nervous. They were students, they were young, they were first timers. Fast forward 4 days, day 4, they walk in there confident, knowing what they're doing, eloquent. The learning curve was just so, to me, it was a miracle watching the 4 days and how they grew. And that's what really sold me about the VIS as an educational experience, because it was just so efficient at getting those soft skills across. And skills which some students go, as Ingeborg said, graduate and they've never heard of them before. And so they don't have to be trained when they get to the law firms, because they already got that basis, which is it's just so amazing.
Yes, it's really amazing. It's really amazing how fast they learn and how prepared they get for the rest of their lives. So Cesar, can you please follow?
Yeah, thank you. I had the experience of coaching a team for a couple of years, and I had the experience of being the father of a mootie for 1 year. And it's amazing how much into the competition they get, in how as Louise said, how effective that is in terms of learning. Because I don't think I have ever seen anything in law school that gets them so involved and gets them like studying up to 1 in the morning and every day, and practicing hundreds of times. It's really amazing how that works. And Louise, I would like to ask you a question about the format of the VIS East this year. We will have it again in person after 2 virtual editions due to the pandemic. And
3 virtual editions, Cesar.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, and so and now, do you see any developments or changes that will remain after the pandemic, after this experience? What are the expectations for this new face-to-face edition?
Well, as far as the mood is concerned, there are certain things, but they're probably less obvious to an onlooker, because we're going to go back to the face-to-face mood. Now, we know that if there were suddenly a horrible wave and we couldn't get together, we could go back and do it virtually. And that's really so important. We have grown so much in terms of our use of IT, and the COVID has dragged us into the 21st century. And so things like, we don't print out the memoranda anymore. That used to be a huge waste of paper. We had tables full. Those of you who've been to the Dachgeschoss in Vienna, there were tables piled high, and all that paper just got shredded at the end. And so that's the kind of thing that we'll never go back to that now. We've got electronic transmission now. We've also proven that it could be done, that you could have a competition online, you could have hearings online. And I think that the fact that VIS East did it first, everybody else figured, well, if they could do it, then we have to do it too. And we saw courts going online, we saw big arbitrations going online, and people who had said that would never happen, that couldn't be, they couldn't do it, did do it because they had to do it. So I think we're definitely into the 21st century, and we won't go back. That said, if we had another epidemic, God help us, we know we could handle it.
Yeah, that's true, and it has to do a lot with these movements in favor of greener arbitration, and so the fact that we were able to learn from this very difficult experience. Ingeborg, would you like to comment?
Yes, I think our confidence in doing things virtually really has grown a lot, and this relates to the real world, to real arbitrations. And also, for example, I want to mention the pre-moots. Pre-moots will be done more often virtually than now in person. And what I also experienced, I was sitting on the first personal in-person pre-moot in Belgrade this year, and there one student dropped out because of COVID. So we had a hybrid hearing. He was there virtually on the screen, and he interacted with his team members and the other side and the arbitral tribunal. So I think it gives us much more confidence. But what we also learned is how important the interpersonal actions are. We missed it, and now we can cherish it, that we can meet in person again.
Yeah, that's very interesting to have this realization of how important it is to have the opportunity to be in person with everybody. It's true that since we couldn't for 3 years, now it feels a lot even more important and even better. And Christina, would you like to continue?
Yeah, I think everyone is happy and already making reservations for the Wies East and the Wies Moot in Vienna. So at least I'm very happy to be able to do it. So as Louise told us, so we know that one of the goals of the Wies East is to promote the knowledge and the use of the CISG, which is the UN Convention on Contracts for the International Sale of Goods. So how important is Latin America in the CISG system? How can Latin American teams benefit, especially from participating at Wies East? And I say that not only the teams, but also arbitrators. So Ingeborg, can you please tell us your thoughts?
The CISG is extremely important for Latin American countries and lawyers. Almost all Latin American countries are member states of the CISG, except for a few like Venezuela and Bolivia. All in all, the CISG now has 95 member states. That means that more than 80% of global sales transactions are potentially governed by the CISG. And the CISG gives Latin American parties especially a benefit, because very often they do not have the superior bargaining power, like, for example, European companies or US American companies, to impose their own law on the other party. So a Brazilian party will hardly be able to impose on a European party Brazilian law. But what they can do with the CISG, they can say, well, if you do not accept Brazilian law, at least we have a law in common. We have a joint common law, and that is the CISG, and that is still better than if a Latin American party has to agree to the law of an American state or to some unknown European law like Belgian law or Dutch law. So it enhances the bargaining power of Latin American party with respect, especially to those with larger, superior bargaining power from the US or from Europe. What I have been seeing up to now, many Latin American companies are choosing the CISG explicitly in their standard terms and conditions, although it would apply anyway in contracts with European parties. For the students, the gain is the in-depth knowledge of the CISG that they gain via the WIS East, and that makes them fit for practice representing Latin American companies in international negotiations and disputes.
Okay, this is a very strong reason for the students to register and take part in the competition. Louise, can you give us your opinion, please?
After Ingeborg has taken care of the CISG half of the moot, let me just address the arbitration part, because arbitration, although it has been growing tremendously over the past decade since the Convention of New York of 1958, it is still underused in many countries, and or many countries who do use arbitration use it for domestic disputes or for government systems that involve arbitration or something like it. But a lot of countries are not familiar with the purpose of arbitration and the advantages of it, and the how to do, the practicalities of it as well. And so students there are very few, or were until recently, and Cesar, I think you can probably tell me that in the last few years, since I arrived in Brazil the first time, the number of arbitration courses and programs and theses has blossomed. And part of that has been due to people studying about parts of arbitration that they had no idea existed, and they learned to see the distinction between common law and civil law. So, I mean, down in South America, most of the countries are all civil law countries, right? And so your neighbors are civil law, whereas in America, everybody's common law. So it's like you've got these solitudes. They're not very far away, but they are not really getting an experience of these other cultures. So now with international trade growing the way it is, and so many things that are imported to South America come from Asia now. So many things that are going out of South America are going all over the world, but including to Asia. So there's just so much more opportunity and advantage to using arbitration. And so and then you make the contacts as well by going to the WIS East. You actually meet the people that you're going to be dealing with.
Yes, I think this contact part is also one of the most important ones, since China is one of the biggest commercial partners of Brazil. So once you're there, it's a unique experience. Yes. Cesar, please, can continue.
Yeah, thank you. What Christina just mentioned, I think is very interesting to point out that in practice, in real life, we come across many contracts involving Asian companies. We come across many contracts providing for arbitration in Asia under Asian institutions, arbitration rules, and it's really amazing to be able to be there in Hong Kong and meet people from Hong Kong International Arbitration Center, from Singapore International Arbitration Center, from CIATAC in China, and then have this in-person relationship with those things that you will see afterwards in contracts and in your practice. And do you see, starting with Luis here, how do you see the participation of Latin American teams at VisEast? I know there are usually around 8 teams in Latin America that come to VisEast regularly. And how do you see that? Do you think there is room for growth? Should there be more Latin American teams there?
Cesar, I think there's room for more. I'll tell you that this year we have a slightly smaller moot. At our top, just before COVID, we had 138, actually. It was 140, but 138 teams. And we've never sought to grow a lot. We've tried to keep the growth as gradual as possible, just so that it didn't come out of hand, for practical reasons as well. But I think this year we have fewer Latin American teams, and I think possibly that is because many people thought we would not be doing it in person. We didn't think we would do it in person. We thought we would have the arguments virtually. It was only in September that we learned that we were going to be free and we would be able to do it. So I think some people didn't budget for it. Also, some people may have got pushback from their schools now. Well, you participated and you did well and you got a great experience online, so you don't need to travel. And I'm afraid that may be an excuse for some schools, many of whom may be suffering from financial problems due to COVID, for putting the brakes on. I hope that's going to be a temporary thing that over the next year or two we'll go back to normal. But the answer is yes. I would love to see more Latin American teams. Brazil is very well represented. But we've had one Argentinian team, we've had Mexican teams, we've had have we had an Ecuadorian team? I think we did. We've had, but not always regularly. Really, in terms of the growth, I think Latin America is definitely growing. The interest is growing, and the participation is on an upward trend. But as I said, interrupted by COVID, I hope just temporarily. Where I'm concerned is that we aren't getting enough African teams involved in the VIS and the VisMoot. And Africa and China being such close partners right now, everything you said about Brazil and China is on steroids with Africa and China. And so I think we need to, to be there too, I think, or them to come here.
Yeah, CIR has grown a lot in Latin America in general. We are about to open a branch in Peru, which is a very representative country in terms of international arbitration in the region. And so we hope there will be more teams at VisEast. I know the registrations will end on the 29th of November, so there are still a couple of weeks for registration. And Ingeborg, before we close or we come to the last question, I would like to just ask if you would like to add anything about this idea of more Latin American teams participating in Hong Kong.
Yes, I think what is so important for the students is that the VisEast exposes them not only to European and arbitrators from Western countries, but especially also to arbitrators from China, from Hong Kong, from Singapore. And it's the different thinking, not only the legal thinking, but also the behavior of different arbitrators from different parts of the world. And the students learn that no matter what the background of the arbitrator is, be it from Asia, from Latin America, be it from a common law country, from a civil law country, the students have to convince him or her of the client's case. And that is so important, that they adjust to these different environments, and that it's what they have to do during their professional career.
Thank you. And Christina?
Well, I think I have one last question here, and we can start with Ingeborg. If you have any last remarks or recommendations you would leave for those who are still deciding whether to register and take part in this East this year.
I strongly recommend, do not hesitate. Register now. It's going to be a life-changing experience, not only professionally, but also on the personal level.
Louise?
Well, I would say do hesitate, because you should remember that it's going to be a lot of work and it's a huge commitment. But I agree that after hesitating, you should dive in and give it your very best, and it will return 1,000-fold.
Thank you.
Well, we're coming to the end of this of the program, so I would like to thank again Ingeborg Schwenter, Louise Barrington, and my colleague Cristina Mastrobono for this really lively and enlightening conversation that we had today. And I would like to invite all of you to keep following CIR Brazil on Instagram, LinkedIn, or our website, so that you're up to date with our activities and in the next episodes of this program. And I would like to especially invite you to join us again every other Wednesday at 6:30 São Paulo time for CIR Brazil Moment. Thank you again, and see you next time.
Thank you.